Hi everybody! I thought you might like to watch me do one of the calligraphy quotations as I start from the very beginning of tearing the paper to prepare it, of taking the quotation and making sure that I know whether I have the author's name or not. If I don't have the author, I don't put quotation marks around it. If I do, then I need to plan out where that author's name is going to go. All the way to the writing of the calligraphy in a variety of ways, and going all the way to the final drying process and erasing of the pencil lines that I use to keep it straight. So here's how I do it. Alright, so what I have here are all the supplies I need. I have a yardstick because the paper is long and I want to draw some lines so that I can write the calligraphy straight. I have another ruler to measure. This is a little bit more accurate ruler, so I will use this to measure where the lines should go. 2 calligraphy brushes. These are Chinese calligraphy brushes made out of squirrel and goat hair. Interesting. They're very soft and very pliable, and they move very nicely, which is why they're called calligraphy brushes. 2 sizes because it depends on how many words there are. If I have fewer words, I'll use the larger brush. If I have more words to put in, then I need to make the letters smaller, so I use the smaller brush. I will decide whether to use paint to make a color using these brushes, or perhaps use a brush pen, which I'll just make a mark here on this paper. You'll see can be wide or very narrow. So this is a brush pen that works very nicely on this paper. And some of the lettering, this is a double-ended brush. It's actually a brush there and a pen on this end, so I can make some marks like this. And I will just decide that after I see how it might lay out on the paper. And then I have my paint palette here and some water, and then final thing is the paper itself. Oh, I didn't show you this. This is where I write from the computer that you enter your quotes. I write them all out because I want to do it by hand every time that I write it or read it. I will remember it by doing it multiple times. Better so that when I'm actually doing the calligraphy, I won't write the wrong word. It'll spark a memory of, oh, wait a minute, there's something interesting about the way this is worded. I have to read it one more time very carefully to make sure that I don't make an error. So far, so good. I haven't put a wrong word on any of them yet. I do anticipate I probably will have that problem soon. And then I put the person's name who did the quote. So this one that I've checked these 3 off. Now I'm doing Natalie Santiago's, so you'll see me do that one. And I'll set that aside. And then the paper itself is acid-free drawing paper in heavy weight. And it's a pretty nice product here. It's Strathmore brand, and it comes in tear-off sheets. And this is where it gets a little tricky. The tear-off isn't too bad. I just want to make sure I don't actually rip the paper itself. And I haven't always had the most success in getting these to tear smoothly. There we go. Once it gets started, it goes okay. Oops. Almost made it to the end. So once I get the piece of paper out of the book, then I can take it and fold it multiple times. It might seem a bit, I don't know, childish, I guess. I remember when I was a kid folding paper and then tearing it. I still do that, not just as a kid. But I want to line up the edges really carefully. And I've discovered a way to use my arms. So I'm holding really firmly with my fingertips and then pressing my arms down all at the same time and going outward so that I don't get extra creases in the middle of the paper. press down pretty firmly. And now comes sort of a magical moment. It's really hard to just flip it back without getting creases all through here. So I flatten it pretty firmly here first, and then it folds in the opposite direction really easily. Now, don't stop there. Do it over and over and over, so that the paper, each time you do this pressing of the fold, weakens right along that fold, and then it's really easy to just tear it right apart. Sometimes getting it started is the hardest thing to do. So I will start, I'll do probably one or two more. There we go. I think that's enough. I can kind of tell by when I press my finger down. So what I'm going to do is just start the tear a little bit at the beginning. And then from here, just like you would do with any other kind of paper. It's just trickier when it's a long piece. Not to bend, I'm trying not to bend it over here, and I'm trying to make sure I put even stress on that crease. There we go. So now we have our two. Press this down just a little smoother. Set one aside, and now we're ready to do Natalie's. I will take this rough edge and put it at the bottom. Both sides are the same. Watercolor paper is different on both sides, but this paper is the same on both sides, so that makes it a little easier. Just a few little imperfections I might smooth out with my finger. And now comes the trickiest part of all, and that is the layout, trying to figure out how many lines I need. So this is how I do it. I take the words, and I've figured out that when I write larger letters, the width of this half sheet of paper is about the same number of words that I can fit when I use larger lettering on the banner. So, and I'll take the words and I'll actually kind of imagine it all begins, would probably go to about here, and not too long, ends, not too long, in, short word, your. Now I don't want to go any farther than that probably. So that comes out to be exactly the words that are in the first line. So I can see now that we're going to have a problem because I have that line, that line, that line, and the word it underneath. What I'm going to try to do though is make this it fit into one of the other, into this third line instead of going into a fourth line. And I don't have an author, so I won't use quotation marks, and I won't have to worry about having an extra line at the bottom. So I'm going to go with this, cross my fingers that it'll work, with 3 lines. I'll take my ruler and because this is half of an 18-inch piece of paper, I get a 9-inch measurement, grab my pencil, and if I'm doing 3 lines in 9 inches, I want the top to have a little more space. So I'll go 3 inches down, and then 2 inches for the second line, and 2 inches for the third line. So I have 3 inches at the top for the letters to be up there, and 2 inches at the bottom underneath the bottom line. Do the same over here, and then just draw my lines so that I can write the calligraphy straight. So 3, 5, 7. And now, this isn't a tool of perfection. My husband does woodworking, and he has the most amazing tools for perfect measuring. Once in a while I borrow from him, but this isn't. I'm going to call this art and not perfection. It's beauty that we're after, not perfection. Okay, so I'll get the 3 lines here. I think the battery's about to die in my camera. I'm going to check that, and then we'll get started with the actual lettering just right off the bat after these lines are drawn. Okay, I am back, and now I have set the paper and rulers aside. I'll be needing the pencil. And one thing I will say is this is a very soft number 2 pencil. I ordered them special just for this type of work because even though this looks like a pretty dark mark here, it will erase really easily. And I use a kneaded eraser. I'll show you that at the end. They're absolutely wonderful. They don't leave little gnurs on your paper. Alright, so it all begins and ends in your mind. What you give power to has power over you, or you allow it. So that's the quote. I'm going to I think I'm gonna be brave. This one's really tricky. Most of them are pretty straightforward. Lots of words or fewer words. This is just in the middle of both. I could go lots of different ways with it. I'm gonna say the large calligraphy brush. I have my water here. I'll wet the brush. What's nice about these calligraphy brushes is that they make a really nice point on the end, so I can get very thin lines, and when I press down going on the downstrokes, I can make thicker lines. And I think I'll do it in a cursive but not slanted. I think I'll do it straight up and down so it won't be in italic. And now the choice of colors. This is always a hard part too. I've only done one purple. I'm going to go with purple. I have a nice big, I don't know if you can see that, nice big blob of purple. I never clean my palette because I always can use the colors that are left behind. They just dry a watercolor. Look how beautiful that purple is when I wet it. So I'm wetting it and then rolling the brush so that I keep that tip nice and pointed. And then I'm going to do just a swatch on here to make sure it's going to work. What's the first word? It. Just try it on. So pretty blobby. I might have too much water in there. It's always a little tricky to get the right balance of water and paint. Yeah, I think that works better. Alright, time to start. It all begins, and I usually will get about 3 words in my mind, and I remember that I don't want to be too spread out so that I'll fit that last word into the 3rd line, and here we go. And I'm going to be kind of quiet while I do this, but one thing I will say is I love T's. You'll see that all over these quotes. I'm going to do some pretty exciting T's on this one. A nice big swoop like that. And you get a variation in color. It's darker at the top where the point was with more paint, and then down underneath it's a little lighter. I like that look. All is next. One of the hardest things to do in calligraphy is where you have 2 letters that are the same right next to each other, like LL. And the reason it's hard is because that'll get heavier. So you can always just touch up. I don't touch up very much though. I prefer to just leave it alone if I think that it's workable. It's because you want to make those 2 L's look identical, and obviously you see a difference there, but no worries. We all know what it says. Begins. I lift my brush every so often, usually after each letter, to make sure I have good control and I can move my arm. You see how that split the hairs a little bit on the dotted I can look pretty exciting too. I'm going to go a little bit at an angle on the dotted I's. Okay, we have a little bumpy line on the B, but once again, it's probably going to be that way in other letters, so it will look okay, it'll look consistent. Let's move on to and ends. And when you learn calligraphy, you learn the strokes and not the letters. So what I'm thinking about right now is a downstroke, and then a circle, and then I'm going to make a loop, and then an upstroke. So I'm thinking that's what's going through my mind as I go. Notice how dark that is at the bottom of the N. Just another little, I'm going to call that beautiful variation in paint. And ends. Upstrokes are thin, downstrokes are thick. Ends. Ooh, there we go. In your. I think it's working the way I was planning. In. Start the Y, yeah, I'll start it from up here. Different starting points depending on the style you want to go with. I'm going to do the Y this style. Okay. I don't know if I'm in camera or not on that, but hopefully. Alright, so it looks like I ended up with about the same amount of distance at the ends on the front end and the back end of that line. So that was what I was going for. So far so good. Now I have to just make sure I can get all the rest of the words in 2 more lines. Mind is the next word, and then a period. So I'm looking to see this distance would be the same here. Sometimes I measure it, sometimes I just eye it. It all begins and ends in your mind, period. And I actually draw a circle for the periods when we're working with this large lettering. Okay. What you give power to, okay, W. Love W's. Let's do this fancy one. Give a little more paint. I like it to be pretty dark. If the brush skips a little, just let it be empty. There's another T. Oh boy, I love those T's. Maybe a little more paint for the T. Okay. What you... So I remembered to look back at the Y here so that my Y and U will be the same style. I don't want to change style of lettering as I go. Many different ways to write these letters. Get a little more water and paint both. Keeping that water consistently, that's why you get so much variation, is that the water weakens the darkness of the paint, so when it's lighter there's more water, and Where it's darker, there's less water, but just trying to keep it as consistent as possible is my goal here. What you give power to try not to stop in the middle of a word and reload the brush. I want to make sure I have enough for the whole word. Once in a while I think it's too weak or thin. Here's an example where I wanted to connect those letters a little better, so I will add a little touch there. To, what you give power to has. If I can get has on here, then I know I'll have enough. I think that's what I'll do. To has. I think that's going to work now that I was able to get has on there. Let me just check the camera one more time. So far, so good. I should also say this is my art desk, and I have two lights, one on each side, because I want to make sure that I get an even view of what I'm doing. Not so difficult when I'm doing calligraphy, it's more when I'm doing watercolor that I need that light to be consistent. Okay, so next, this dries pretty fast, so I'm not too worried about smearing the paint. Ink, on the other hand, takes 24 hours to dry, so be mindful of that if you're doing some of this type of writing. Okay, what you give power to has power over you. So I'm going to line that up to about here. Here's another tricky thing. Writing the same word twice. Just like two letters the same, two words that are the same, you want to try to have them look power and power as much alike as possible. Touch that up just a bit. Over you. Too much, a little more paint, and don't forget how to make that line. Some letters I don't change up very much. A Y can start from the bottom line and go up, or it can start from the air, or it can start without that little loop altogether, so lots of possibilities with Y's. Comma, or you allow it. So circle, comma, or you. Paint, allow it, and we'll be done. Allow cross before the eye. Because the dot of the eye can be in a variety of places. And period with the circle. Alright, so there it is. I started a lot darker at the beginning than I ended. It's okay. Nice quote. I love to see this. So now, I will allow this to dry overnight, and I have some that I haven't erased the lines on, so I'll go get one of those and show you how that kneaded eraser works, and then we'll be done. So I will set this over to dry, and I'll bring you some of my paintings while I'm at it. I'll show you that here at the very end. Okay, so if you can see this pencil mark, this is one where I used the small end of the pen, and of course it's really amazing how long this stays wet. So I have let this dry at least 2 days now, most of the time just overnight. A kneaded eraser is sort of gummy if you've never seen one of these. You can buy them at the craft store. And you pull it apart because it's got a lot of dirty stuff in it that I've erased over the last year or so when I got this. It comes in a package. I have a new one that I haven't opened yet. It looks like this. And you just knead it like you would knead dough. That's where it gets its name. And it actually dissipates the dirt by spreading it this way. So I always start by just kneading it a little bit. And then I get kind of a bulbous piece there to get the line. And you see how this works is that pencil was very light to begin with, so it's coming off really easily. Out here, no problem. But when I start going in the line, I want to be really careful, or in the lettering I should say, not to press too hard because I don't want to leave any black stuff on the eraser. So some of that ink from the pen might come off. And so that's all I have to do is just erase that. I'll finish the other 2 lines later. Here's another one that I did that's got blue paint. And let me just see if any blue comes off onto this eraser. Start here. Nope, it looks like it's not. That's good. Some of the pigments, I have very expensive artist watercolors, and some of the pigments are really weak in them, but they're that way intentionally to make the watercolor art transparent, so that you can layer one color on top of another on top of another. So that's how that works, and it'll be done then when that's finished. I had to figure out this third one. Yeah, and this is another one that I did with the brush side of the pen. And then my last show and tell. These are some pieces of art. I've been interested in doing snow scenes. This one I put on Facebook, and I think it's about 400 likes on it by now. They love that painting. Interesting, because I just kind of, I did it in about a half hour. These others I spent a little more time on, but you couldn't tell it. I don't even like this one very much. And this is one that's unfinished. I haven't gotten it done, but it's a commission because somebody saw this other one and said, I'd like to buy that. So I'm making her this one.